Chair, I can confirm we're now live.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to this hybrid meeting of the Employment Committee. Please note that this meeting is being broadcast and recorded. For clarity, voting is only permitted by the members who are present in the room. Any member joining the meeting remotely is able to participate in discussion and or debate, but they are not able to vote. Other than that, the usual rules applying to the conduct of committees apply. First of all, therefore, can I ask, are there any apologies?
I have received apologies from Councillors Wade and Neal.
Thank you. I can see members of the committee who are in attendance and their names will be recorded in the minutes. Please can the clerk confirm if any members are joining remotely and if those members could confirm their attendance when Hannah calls your name.
Thank you, Chair. I can see we've got Councillor Bandari.
Present.
Councillor Dudley.
Present.
Councillor Porter.
Present.
Councillor Hayden.
Present.
And Councillor Angel.
Present.
That's everyone online, Chair.
Thank you, Hannah. Item 2 on the agenda are declarations of interest, which is enumerated at item 2, and members are asked to declare any pecuniary or effective interest in any matter in the minutes. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest? I'm receiving a negative response. I would just remind members that if anything happens during the course of the meeting where they have an interest, they have to declare it. The minutes from the previous meeting are on pages 3 to 6 of the agenda and they need to be approved as a correct record of the meeting. Can I have an agreement that they are a correct record?
Happy to agree that.
I'm not seeing any dissent, so the minutes are accepted as a correct record. Item 4 is urgent items of business. Are there any urgent items of business?
No, none notified.
Thank you. Item 5 is an update from the local joint committee meeting held earlier today. That meeting took place. The principal item that was discussed was item 7 on our agenda, which related to social worker pay and retention. The unions confirmed that they had been consulted on that matter and had no observations to make on it. I don't know if any other member who was present at that meeting has any other comment to add. No? Fine. Thank you for that. Item 6 are the minutes of the subgroups, pages 7 to 8, which are the minutes of the local joint committee held on the 12th of July. Can I have agreement that those are a correct record? That is so noted. Item 6.7 on the agenda is the paper dealing with the recruitment and retention of social care, which was also the paper that was discussed with our trade union colleagues this afternoon. Paul Young is present and I will ask him to introduce the paper in a moment, but at the same time I ought to welcome Ronya Siggins, who is our Director for Adult Services and matters associated therewith, who's available to comment and answer questions should there be any. Paul, can I hand over to you to lead us through the paper and its background, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair. The paper covers a number of areas to do with the challenges that we've faced with the recruitment of social workers, both in children's services and adult services. The paper and the purpose of this report is to present to Employment Committee some revised arrangements for the pay and reward processes for children and adult social workers. Just for a piece of background, this work has been going on for some time, 9 months, 10 months or so, where we've had a project team established to try and review the arrangements for the paying conditions for our social workers. And if you look at paragraph 3 of the covering report, there were 3 main reasons that we were looking at this in particular. One was to reduce the reliance on agency workers and agency spend. And then you will see in the report the increasing costs related to agency spend, and that was something which was a key part of this particular project. Critically also was to look at stabilising the workforce and ensuring that we could actually rely on a more stable permanent workforce rather than that reliance on agency workers, which they do have a tendency to move around more than our permanent staff. And thirdly, which is really important as part of this work, is actually to be looking at career pathways. And whilst this paper is concentrating on the pay arrangements that we're looking at, I think we just need to also take account of what we're trying to establish here in terms of the career pathways that we've established for our social workers, both in children's and adults, and accompanying that, the learning and development opportunities. If I can just draw your attention to the supporting information on page 10 of the pack at 5.2. I've talked about the project team established to explore the current market factors and the comparative salaries. That's both locally and some of the challenges on a more regional basis. I've got to say that this work has been really quite challenging, partly due to some of the difficulties of obtaining some information from other local authorities. So we've had to rely quite heavily on recorded vacancies as well. They've actually been showing on various media. But the team has spent the 9 months or so gathering and interpreting the data and really coming forward with these recommendations for committee. I mentioned earlier on the 5.6, the learning and development opportunities, and this needs to be considered alongside that. And I think it's interesting to note with the recent inspection from Ofsted for children's social care, it has been recognised that the learning and development opportunities in Bracknell are quite strong, but what we have got is a situation where there isn't the capacity in the workforce to enable all of the social workers to access it because they're too busy on the day job. And that's something which clearly was an aspect of this work that we wanted to try and address to make sure that, again, we can look at supporting our staff and developing our staff. 5.7 is highlighting the challenges that we've had for this project in differentiating between children and adult social workers. And the committee will be aware that for children's social workers, we actually have separate pay arrangements, whereas the base salary has been the same for children and adult social workers. But for some years now, I think it's over 10 years, we've actually had market premium payments for children's social workers and various roles in children's social care, and also retention payments. That has obviously been a piece of work that we've had to do and implement in the past. That provided this particular project some challenges, because clearly what we wanted to do was actually level up the pay arrangements between children and adults. And as you will note on the tables of the salary recommendations included at 5.8, it hasn't been possible through this work to have a position where we can make recommendation which is going to be exactly the same for children and adults. Because otherwise, if we'd done that based on the substantive salaries that we'd assess them at, they would actually have a situation where a number of posts within children's social care would actually be taking a drop in salary. And given the recruitment and retention challenges, clearly that wasn't going to be a sensible option when we take this forward for a recommendation. That said, we have the details of the pay arrangements, as I say, are incorporated within the tables at 5.8. With the social workers, then what we wanted to do is actually look at addressing some of the challenges, again, through adult social care. And at 5.9, what these recommendations will do is actually put Bracknell Forest in a higher position than other Berkshire authorities for adult social workers. Given that situation, we will find that the expectations are that, and certainly the feedback we're getting from the services, that there's great optimism within adult social care that this is going to have a very positive impact on the ability to recruit new staff and indeed retain staff. The same can't definitively be said in children's services, because what we have got is a situation where we have been able to incorporate the market premium payment into the base substantive salary, which is clearly a benefit, and that was from the research that we have done. One of the key elements that our social care staff wanted to see a higher base salary, and if you think about that for certainly newly qualified or individuals that are looking for mortgages at this time, that's really important, because it does provide a degree of stability and permanence in the salary payment. But with that increases, as I say, the differential between children, the increases between children and adults is certainly more favourable to the adult social care. At 5.10, I've highlighted there to do with some of the information to do with the career pathways and what these proposals will actually bring. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of areas of that for you. At 5.10 at B, the career pathways will actually align to the learning and development programme that we've also updated recently. And critically, the apprenticeships and the apprenticeship roles is something that we're really trying to develop in Bracknell, and we are looking to all of the opportunities to have a stronger grow your own approach across social care. And as a good example of that, we shortly be in a position where we are going to be having an arrangement with a university in the south of England where we can actually have an apprenticeship programme for AMPs, which in some ways where we have such difficulty in recruiting to those posts, that's a really positive development. Other areas at 5.10 is clearly where we've tried to meet some of these objectives. Objective C at 5.10 is to make sure that the existing market premium payments, and as much as we possibly could, the retention payments could be embedded into the base salaries. And as I mentioned earlier on, whilst we've gone some way by doing that, by removing the market premium arrangements, there is still the requirement for the 4% retention payment across children's. Other areas there, we've just got identification in terms of the career pathways, and this is really important for this work, because clearly the reward packages that we're talking about here is and should have a positive impact. The career pathways aspect of it is something that certainly through the discussions that we've been having with the management team is equally important, that we can actually make sure that staff, when we get them in, we are developing and supporting. Other than that, the rest of the paper talks about a lot of the sort of local and regional challenges that we've faced when we are undertaking this review. And I just draw you back to the initial page of the document where we're asking Employment Committee to consider the report and approve the recommendations of 1, a revised pay and grading scheme for social workers, 2, the payment of the 4% retention arrangements for the children's social workers, and 3, just extending the market premium payment, so we are treating all of our heads of service consistently across children's and adults. Okay, happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. I'll ask the director in a moment if she would like to add anything to that and comment on it. In particular, I'm looking at paragraph 510 A on page, I don't know whether it's 5 or 13, whether it's a big number or a little number, but I'm looking at that paragraph, and also F. Those talk about sort of flatter pay structures, career development and management roles, and career growth. And I was wondering if the director could sort of, I was going to say confirm to us, but that's rather a leading thing, explain to us about that, and particularly whether the structure and the management roles are as sort of flat and as effective as they can possibly be.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the charts, the career pathway and structure, so just to explain the range of different roles, that is the length of time and experience in a role, not necessarily individuals naturally reporting to others. So in terms of the oversight and supervision, the newly qualified social worker will require, or somebody who's been qualified for 1 or 2 years, they have to have simpler work, they have to have smaller caseloads and a high level of supervision on those cases because of the nature of the cases. So when we're looking at the structures there, newly qualified, so really early part of their career, then 1 to 2 years, then social worker, then senior. That generally describes the level of complexity of the work, because obviously you realise that both across children and adults, the more experienced workers would tend to take on court work and different types of activity of that nature. And there are some roles that also require additional level of qualification in order to undertake specific acts, especially where we reduce people of their liberty. So the newly qualified ASYE social work and senior social work, those are grades that are supported in a way to actually manage the complexity of the work rather than line management as we would understand it to be. So professional supervision, oversight, the line of sight of managers' decision making on casework and things of that nature, not necessarily people directly reporting for management purposes, sort of pay and rations. Where it does become, so senior social workers or social workers, then we have the role of ATM, that's assistant team manager. And again, the majority of an assistant team manager role would be a management oversight of cases, key decision making, case file audits, learning from casework, that type of activity, and then the team manager again. What we don't have, because it's already been removed in Bracknell, we don't have a service manager level. So in many areas you have your team manager, service manager, and then head of service. So we've already reduced, at some point in Bracknell's history, a service manager level out of the equation in that structure. But just to be reassured that when it comes to spans and layers, we will always, irrespective of restructures and where it lands within the People Directorate, we will continue to look at the opportunities to reduce layers and increase spans of control for roles, because you are correct in terms of the premise behind the question, that where people, are we managing people just for having additional manager, and they may be managing 1 or 2 people and they're called a manager and rates get inflated and things of that sort. When it comes to the professional social work career pathway, it's not designed to do that. It's about professional supervision and safety of children or adults within that, within those cases and casework. But across all of the other roles, where at all possible, as we restructure, we will be looking at reducing layers and increasing spans where possible.
Fine, thank you for that. and thank you for answering the question. Is there anything you would want to add to what Paul has said in the report before I ask other members if they have any questions?
Just one point is just to comment that both occupational therapists and social workers are regulated professionals, and they have to formally register and retain registration in order to practice, so similar to doctors and nurses. So there is that requirement, and we do support them as a council in order to ensure that they are able to continue to register with their professional body in order to be able to practice.
Thank you. I have Councillor Dudley and then Stuart McKellar. Councillor Dudley.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if you want to come to Stuart first, and then I'll come in with questions after. He might clarify what I want to ask.
Stuart, over to you.
Thanks, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Dudley. I just want to commend Chairman on the recommendations. Now, clearly, the matters of employment status and terms and conditions, etc., for all staff are under the remit of the Employment Committee. But clearly, this proposal in front of you this evening does have very significant financial implications to the scale that they would require executive approval. So, just to make sure that members are aware that there is a report going to the executive next Tuesday, which, assuming that the Employment Committee is supportive of these proposals, it does confirm the money being in place for them at that meeting next Tuesday. But clearly, wherever the committee finds itself at the end of this evening, that will be reported into the executive next week.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Dudley.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question first of all. It seems to me we were here about 8-10 months ago on this very subject, where we agreed, was it £1,000 market increase, or a kind of a payment to try and keep staff? That was on these grades as well, wasn't it?
That was across the whole of the council, yes, indeed.
Right. Okay, fine. And the other thing is, if I refer you to page or Appendix C, local pay comparisons for current social work pay, where it's saying Bracknell Forest Council current 35 with, or 41 with, is that the MP and RP? So can you just explain what MP and RP are?
Page 25. We're on page 25, is that right, Colin?
No, Appendix C, page 25, yeah.
Yes, just for clarification, the MP is market premium and the RP is the retention payment.
Okay, fine. I'm just trying to kind of square that circle, because I'm looking on our current vacancies and we've got a social worker advertised up to 43,000. So how does that work with that column there?
Can you just direct to me where that's in the report, please?
Well, no, in the report, Appendix C is giving the pay, and on Bracknell Forest Borough website, a social worker, MASH, whatever that is saying up to 43,000.
Right, that's probably one is that a mental health practitioner? Because there's social worker.
Exciting opportunity in our MASH for individuals for a social worker. MASH, it's under Children's Services.
Yeah, that would be the safeguarding hub. I'll have to look at that separately and come back to you. I haven't got that at hand.
Okay, because I'm just trying to understand if on our public website we're advertising a job for up to 43,000, then we're being shown on Appendix C a local pay comparison. The two don't equate.
Right, can I draw your attention to page 11 of the pack, where we've got the salary details? The social worker the actual current details for a social worker for the total current package is 43,000.
Right, on F31, yeah, 43,000.
That's correct. So the particular advert you're referring to is accurate. I'm just
Right.
looking back at Appendix C.
Page 25.
I will have to check on that, but I would refer you back to the document.
Well, I'm sorry, but what is it? Is it 35 as on Appendix C, or is it 43?
I'm just confirming the details are on the page at 5.8 of the document with the actual salaries at April 22. F31 is 43,000.
Right, so on page 25, what salary rate is that referring to then?
I think that is possibly a error on that particular document, but I want to refer you back to the document on the main part of the paper at 5.8. The social worker current salary is F31 at 43,000.
Okay, so if I may continue, Chair, if that's the case, if that's an error and that's 43,000, then our comparator doesn't look bad at all, does it, against the other boroughs in our area?
For children's social workers, it doesn't, but for adult social workers, it does. And if you look at what we're proposing for social workers, we're only looking at an increase of £800 on the new proposals for the highest salary for a social worker in
Right,
children's.
Okay. So in children's social care, we're looking quite favourable against our colleagues in Reading, Wokingham and the Royal Borough.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. But in adult, what you're saying is in adult social care, we're not looking as favourable.
That's correct.
So are we looking then to make this recommendation for the adult social care workers or children and adult social care workers?
I think it's clear in the paper that we're looking at this recommendation for all of social workers, for children's and adults.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Me.
Thank you, Colin.
Just on
Councillor Hahn.
just the comment on the numbers, the 35,336 on adult social care on the page 25 seems to refer to a newly qualified social worker because that matches what's on page 12, first line, the current salary. I can't match it to any of the children's ones, but I can certainly match the 35,336 to a newly qualified social worker. So I'm assuming when you're comparing to the other councils, you're also comparing to newly qualified social workers, not other grades.
That's correct in that instance, yes.
Thank you.
Stuart, is this a new hand or is it your old one that's still up?
All right. I'm not
Apologies,
talking now.
Chairman, it's my old one.
Thank you. I have Councillor
Who was it?
Angel. Councillor Angel?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Paul, thank you for the answers this afternoon on the questions we asked at the local joint. A lot of this activity seems to be because of agency costs. Would I be right there?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
If you look at the document, we've given some indication of the agency costs and the increasing costs at 5.3 of the report. And we are experiencing increasing agency costs as a result of the vacancies that we've got. And what I would say is that because the staff team, the vacancies are increasing, the numbers of agency workers that we're having to rely on are growing. So this is clearly one of the areas that we're trying to address.
Okay. Paul, thank you. I mean, at the moment, how many agency staff do we need to have on the record? And what do we expect that to be if this recommendation was passed? What reduction would we be expecting to see?
That's thank you for that question.
As numbers and pounds, please.
It's very difficult to respond to that on the basis that we would want. We're always going to need a number of agency staff, because where we have people leaving the service, there is an expectation that we are always going to need to rely on a degree of agency workers. The proposals that we're putting forward is to actually try and to reduce that to an absolute minimum. I can't stay here exactly what sort of number that's actually going to align to, but what I would say is that where we looked at these discussions with colleagues across children and adult social care, what we wanted to do is get some sort of indication of what these proposals could do in the short term. And if you look at paragraph 5.27, then we've got some of the suggested reductions in agency workers there.
Yeah, thank you. I have to say, as an ordinary member of this council and this employment committee, that doesn't really give me any feel at all for what we're hoping to achieve. In terms of me responding to residents, in terms of the increased cost that this council is going to incur because of this, give me some facts that I can relate to. How many agency staff do we have now, and how many will we have because of this recommendation if it's approved?
Thank you, Councillor Angel. Can I refer that point to the director to see whether we can get clarification? You ask a question, of course, which has troubled all of us, and you know, life being what it is, I suspect there may not be as a definitive answer as we would like. Director.
Sorry, Chairman, this has been going on for 9 months. It's been said. We must have some feel of the numbers.
Chairman, there are numbers in page 20 of the report under paragraph 5.27 about the current number of posts covered by agency and their expectations about the reduction should these proposals be agreed.
Thank you, Stuart. I'll hand over to the director.
So why it's so difficult is to give a definitive position. It depends if we're able to recruit to the permanent posts. So we have budgeted posts. So, for example, adult mental health is an example. So, for example, there's 9 officers. The majority of those are social workers. At the moment, they are predominantly all agency because we are unable to recruit to permanent posts. So we are committed to reducing our agency spend and appointing to permanent positions as we are able to appoint to those posts. So the reduction in the agency numbers will depend on how quickly we can appoint to the permanent posts. But we are committed to reducing our agency spend across the board, because there's a whole range of reasons why we would prefer permanent staff both in adults and children's services. The more worrying number that you can see, and which is referenced in the report, is the approved mental health professionals. Now, they're called AMPs. Those are the individuals who detain individuals under the Mental Health Act. Now, they cost nearly £90,000 a year on agency. We were at risk recently of losing one of our AMPs on the back of understanding that we are looking seriously about the grades of the staff, because they can get these grades in other places all day long, which is why we're struggling to appoint. So unfortunately, Councillor Angel, we're not going to be able to predict. We can give you the figures of what the agency numbers are as of today. We can try to get you that for tomorrow, but it does change by the week depending on who's actually left. We've got a number of people who've recently handed their notice in both in children's and adult services, so we are losing more permanent people, and we'll have to try to appoint to agency staff, but it's not always easy to do so. The final point I will make is that these roles are roles that the local authority has to have in place in order to meet its statutory duties. So social workers have to be employed to support the delivery of obviously children's services and adult services in line with the legislation and our requirements and duty as a council. So which is why we have to replace those posts with agency, because we can't be seen to not provide those services and enact our duties lawfully as a council.
Thank you for that. Do you have any follow-up, Councillor Angel?
Well, Chairman, other to say, thank you for the response, but I have to say, in terms of convincing me, I'm not convinced. It seems to me that we're being asked to support a recommendation. There's a bit of a jump in the dark, and we could be back here in 6 months, 9 months, a year. Oh, it didn't work, and maybe we got to increase the salaries again. And this is after 9 months' work already. I'm not convinced. Sorry.
Paul?
Can I just also draw your attention to some of the evidence at 5.1 and 5.12 on the report? Unfilled vacancies in social care at March 2022 gives a picture of the countrywide challenge with this. And we've got 215,000 vacancies across social care. And with this, with the challenges that we've got generally in social care, we have to look at things differently. And we are in a very competitive environment with our other local authorities. And I think it's fair to say they are themselves looking at their own pay and reward structures in their own particular areas. So that's why this is a particular challenge, to say actually this is going to have an impact, and it's very difficult for us to hand on heart put a percentage reduction that we can actually come back to you and say actually we've achieved that, because the national picture, the local picture, the challenges that we've got with agency workers, and the fact that even with these proposals can earn an awful lot more money as an agency worker as they can as a substantive salary. So this isn't something that we can logically go behind and say this is going to have you make this if this recommendation is agreed, this is going to be the impact, because there are so many variables associated with this.
Thank you. Does any... Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few details questions, but I'll come on to those in a minute. Firstly, I'd like to say that generally I support this proposal because we want good quality staff making decisions that support our families, because what we save, what we invest in paying a decent competitive rate of pay, we are going to get back in having good quality staff making good decisions who are invested in this council, because these people have to make a lot of decisions about who gets support, what that support looks like, how much that's going to cost, and we need quality social workers who know the value of things as well as the cost of things and how we get good value. So I think it's really important that, and I would much rather be investing in long-term members of in-house staff than paying agencies where there isn't that same investment in having best decisions for this council on the long term, which is what we are here to provide for our residents.
Your questions.
Yes, questions. The approved mental health providers at 5.15 under recruitment challenges, there is talk about 6 vacants but covered by 7 agency workers. So I make that one more agency worker than there are vacancies. Is that because there's been a temporary need for more AMHPs, or is it a typo? And related to that, further down at point F of 5.15, when it talks about upskilling some of our senior social workers, would they be doing the AMPT role in addition to their social work role, or would we then be looking for more senior social workers to fill those gaps?
If I respond to the AMP question, as far as the vacancies are concerned, that would be an increase in the numbers because we have the AMPs that are supporting the emergency duty service who are working over the 6 Berkshire authorities. So there will be peaks of work requirement during that. In terms of the senior social work question, then what we would we often need to call upon the AMPs effectively as an on-call arrangement. So these people would actually be able to be on call, particularly for the EDS. But there may well be situations where we are having to backfill for the senior social worker if they fulfil those roles on a permanent basis. So the answer to your question is both. But certainly what it would do is actually add to the capacity of those workers that we are really struggling to recruit. And that is where one of the areas where we do have significant agency spend.
Thanks. Towards the end of the report, when can we expect the inequalities impact assessment? Because it says here you've had to do some additional work, so it couldn't be included. Do we have a date for receiving that? And also, in terms of the climate change implications, it simply says that there isn't any because it's about recruitment or retention of staff, but not why we as a council consider that that wouldn't have a climate implication. If I could ask for some follow-up on that, although I do understand that that might not be possible during this meeting.
Yes, the equalities impact assessment has been almost completed now, so that will be done within the next 2 weeks. That's there's just some rounding up on some aspects of that. We will respond separately on the climate change.
Councillor Dudley, I see you have your hand raised again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to get some evidence behind all this, and I'm looking on the Bracknell Forest website for jobs, and I just put in a search for all jobs in children's services, and according to this, only 2 of those jobs advertised are social workers. There is a senior social worker. Now, according to the list on our agenda papers, there are an awful lot more jobs or agency workers working for us than 2. Can you tell me why we're not advertising jobs that are currently being filled by agency workers?
We've often got jobs completely open, regularly open for social workers because of the regular need to recruit to these areas. The answer to the question is that we're hoping that through these recommendations, we will be in a more favourable position to be advertising these vacancies. So it's dependent on the outcomes of the discussions and the recommendations we're making today, which clearly have to go to full executive. But the recruitment for all of these posts are regularly on the Bracknell Forest website. That's
what I'm looking at right now in front of me. And 2 of those jobs, one of them is a principal social worker, which is advertised at 55,600. And the other one is the one I referred to earlier, which is a social worker, MASH, which are quite, they seem to me quite, directed at a certain type of individual. But on the list you give us, that you're saying that there are vacancies right across the piece that are being filled by agency workers. I'm wondering why those jobs are not being advertised.
The explanation to do with where we're looking at, as I say, these are regularly advertised, these posts, and regularly closed. And
but they're not now. I'm looking at it live right here in front of me.
Okay, but then we're looking at putting forward some new proposals which will improve the recruitment position. If the proposals are and the recommendations that are coming from Employment Committee are agreed, you will see a number of other adverts for these social care staff to fill these posts. And also,
so they're not being advertised on the current salary. You're waiting on the hope that we increase the salary, even though it hasn't been tested at this moment in time. It's not being tested in the market.
then if we can quite easily provide a breakdown of all the recruitment we've tried to do over the last 6 months for social workers, with a breakdown of how many applicants we've had for each, and that will provide some evidence and some clear evidence in terms of the challenges that we've had in recruiting to these posts. In terms of what's live there today, I haven't looked what's live there today, but that certainly there is clearly an expectation, and for the dialogue we've been having with the People DMT, that there's hopefully going to be a situation where we will have an improved package that we can offer and be available for staff, whilst also looking at the individuals that we've currently got as agency workers, looking at trying for longer term agency workers, trying to get them on board as a permanent member of the workforce as well.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I think that if we're being asked to throw some more cash at this, it would have been useful to have in the report, I think, the efforts that have been made to recruit staff to the current grades as part of this report.
Thank you for that comment, Councillor Dudley. Did I see your hand up again, Stuart?
It did go up, Chairman, but Paul Young answered my point I would have made. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member have any other question? I'm seeing no hands. On that basis, then, I will move the recommendation at 2.1 on page 9 of the agenda pack, that the Employment Committee have considered the report, and that we approve the following recommendations. 1, a revised pay and grading scheme for social care. Secondly, the payment of a 4% retention payment for children's social workers. And thirdly, an extension of the market premium payments to the heads of service roles in adult social care. Reasons for those recommendations are listed in the report, and I move that recommendation.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak? I'm getting no indication. Oh, I'm sorry, Colin.
Yeah, Chairman, thank you for that. And you're probably going to get the gist of my feelings on this. It seems to me that we've got an inaccurate report showing an inaccurate comparison between the children's adult social care workers and our neighbouring authorities. And your proposal, your motion that you put forward, wants to increase that another 4% just for children's services. We've got no report on the activity that's being undertaken at the moment, apart from what I've seen live on the Bracknell Forest website to try and recruit social workers at the current salary. And perhaps you'd like to correct me, Chairman, but I think it was less than a year ago that we increased staff's retention payment by £1,000 or some, which doesn't seem to have made any difference whatsoever. So I don't see how this will make any difference at all. Now, the facts of the matter is that if we're looking at our neighbouring authorities, you know, in children's services, if I was a social worker, I would want to work for an outstanding authority, which this authority is. I wouldn't want to work for a failing authority. And I would have thought that is far more of an incentive to come and work for Bracknell Forest Council than 4% or whatever it is that we're offering. I don't see how anybody at the moment could support this recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dudley. I think we can all understand your concern about this matter, and through force of circumstance, I've sat on this employment committee in various capacities for a long period of time, and the simple fact of the matter is that whether we like it or not, This has been a continuous problem. It isn't just our problem, it's a national problem. And until for some reason or another the system that we have changes, we will continue to have to live with this problem and do the very best we can. I can't agree with your comment that the report is inaccurate, because there is an assumption there that all the figures that we wish to achieve and all the recruitment that we wish to make is definitive and we can actually make it happen. We simply can't do that. We are reliant on the situation in the marketplace, and we have dealt with this matter in the best way we can. The director has made it perfectly clear that there are some posts that we have which we are required to have in order to carry out our statutory function. And if we didn't carry out that statutory function, the simple fact of the matter is that we'd be in a worse place than we are now. And the only way we can guarantee that we can meet all these permanent targets, which I think all of us wish to achieve, is if we can get some guarantee that the people who come to work for us actually stay. If they go, we've got no option but in some way to try to replace them and to cover the gap that is there. And the overriding issue that we have to deal with here is that this function that we provide, which up to date has served our residents well, is a statutory function, and we've got an obligation to try and do the very best we can to meet those objectives. And I think that this report is a step in that direction. The salaries have always been a problem. We are trying to address that by rationalising them. You've heard the director talk about the way that the department, the organisation is structured. We're trying to make it a forward-looking career move and encourage the people to stay by that means. So, having had the background knowledge, I'm quite convinced and happy that we are doing the very best we can to solve what will always be a very difficult problem. And on that basis, I would ask the committee to support the recommendations that the report contains. Having said that, and nobody else has indicated a wish to speak, can I ask the committee whether or not they are prepared to vote in favour of the recommendation by raising their hand? Are there any votes against? The committee have approved that recommendation, and accordingly it will go forward in the way that the report has indicated. The next item on the agenda is item 8, which is a verbal update on the 2022 pay award. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take an opportunity quickly just to make one comment about the children's social care and the Ofsted inspection, for which the point that was made is absolutely right. But equally, those same workers in children's social care are more marketable as a result of that Ofsted outstanding banner. And what we are facing are individual agencies calling on those particular individuals to go and work for them as an agency worker and getting significantly more money. And apologies, I know you closed that item, but I think it's important to note as far as the committee is concerned, because that is something which I know Grania and the management team there are facing on a daily basis of calls and contacts from agencies. Thank you. I just wanted to provide a verbal update and went into a bit more detail of this at the local joint with the trade unions present to do with the pay claim from the trade unions and the response from the national employers. The position is that the pay award is the one that's due for April 2022, and as often is the case, it's not awarded at the time of the date, or certainly in good time, and it's often a number of months after the scheduled date of the increase. This year is no different, but it looks like it's actually earlier than the 2021 pay claim. But the claim from the trade unions was an increase of £2,000 on each spine and column point, together with a number of other claims which ranged from a recognition payment for the work during the COVID period, national agreements on family leave and pay and home working policies, increase in mileage rates, changes and updates for contracts on term time only arrangements, and an additional day annual leave. The national employers responded to the trade union claim back in July, and that offer was to have an increase on all spine and column points of 1,925, and an increase of 4.04% on all allowances. Also, that's for April 2022, and then from April 23, an increase in the basic annual leave entitlement. The claim from the trade union, areas that were declined was that the national employers were not prepared to consider a payment for the COVID recognition, and likewise weren't interested in a staff payment and retention scheme across school staff. And one of the areas was also a reduction in the working week from a 37-hour base to 35. That was declined as well. The trade unions have received the national employers' offer, and they have all gone back to their membership to consult with them to see if that is going to be accepted. And we heard this afternoon from Unison that the arrangements have been accepted from their members, so they're willing to accept that. GMB, the ballot for their members, is still open and closes on the 21st of October. Whilst there wasn't confirmation of what the expected outcome of that would be, there was certainly positive signs. So hopefully there'll be a situation where we can have the conclusion of the pay award for due for April 22 shortly. And given the information that we received earlier on from the GMB, if that is forthcoming by shortly after the ballot closes, then we should be in a position to implement the pay award for April 22 in the November pay run.
Thank you, Paul. Does any member have any comment that they wish to make? I am seeing no comments, no questions. That completes our agenda. Thank you all for your attendance and contribution. I declare the meeting closed. Kirsty, can you please tell me when we are not live?
We're no longer streaming, Chair.
Thank you, Kirsty.